Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And for those of you wondering, it was tempting, but the Chicago Bears winning their division and for the first time in 8 years. It's not the good martini, but it's really, really good news. And to do it against Green Bay was pretty satisfying, especially considering the way the first game of the season against them got away. But, Jim, it's a long time coming. In fact, the last time the Bears were in the playoffs was the last time the Jets were in the playoffs, 2010. So next year, you can be there too.
Great. Congratulations. I'm glad you'll have actually something to care about in the playoffs. And I will too. Rooting for your team and totally not rooting against them.
Thank you. You know, they were 3-3 when they played the Jets, and I think all the amped up animosity, all the vitriol that got poured into that campaign just lit a spark with the Bears starting that week. So I don't know what it is, but hopefully they can keep it going, and hopefully the Rams can keep losing, because that'd be really nice to get a bye. But that's a different story. Let's get to our real good martini. This is USA Today. On Friday, a federal judge fulfilled a wish conservatives have held for more than 8 years by ruling the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, unconstitutional. U.S. District Court Judge Reed O'Connor agreed with a group of 20 states with Republican governors or legislatures that argued the constitutionality of the law's individual mandate dissolved when Congress removed the tax penalty for the uninsured. In 2012, the Supreme Court upheld the law and its mandate requiring people purchase insurance on the grounds that it fell within Congress's taxation power. O'Connor said when the tax penalty was removed, so was the central argument upholding the 2010 law's constitutionality. His ruling declared not only the individual mandate, but the entire law unconstitutional. For the immediate future, nothing really changes. The ACA will remain in place while the law's future is handled in the courts, a process that could take months or years to resolve. People who bought coverage on the healthcare exchanges before Saturday's deadline will be insured for 2019. So, Jim, it's a little weird to see how many people think a district court judge's ruling means that's literally the end of the line and there's nothing left of this fight in the legal system or elsewhere. But, you know, this is John Roberts' tortured logic coming home to roost. The taxation power was his only excuse for allowing the law to stand, as the article said back in 2012. The Republican Congress and President Trump took care of that as part of the tax bill. And so now that flimsy underpinning is gone. So even though we do have a long road to go, hopefully that means that this is the beginning of the end for Obamacare, and smarter heads can come together at some point and figure out something better.
Yeah, we're in a strange situation here where there may even be a little bit of role reversal in that the Democrats who see this. Look, when I first saw this headline, I was like, well, wait a second. They repealed the individual mandate in the tax deal back at the end of 2017. So why would this suddenly be affecting now? And the answer is the state of Texas said, well, look, this whole thing is built like a Jenga tower. It all connects together. You can't make one part work without all the other ones. This was not constitutional way back when, but Supreme Court argued it was. But now that this piece has been taken out through constitutional means, passed by Congress, the rest of it can't hold together either. Now, there are some legal scholars, including conservative legal scholars, who are like, not sure they buy into that. But I think it does kind of further indicate that, look, at the heart of it, you can't make insurance work unless you have a lot of people paying in who are not taking a lot out. For obvious reasons, people are not going to want to do that. If we're not legally required to have car insurance in order to drive a car, there are probably a lot of people who would choose to not buy it because they don't feel like paying for it. And their attitude is, well, I'm a good driver. I'll never end up in an accident. Of course, sometimes it ends up you do. But that's how car insurance and home insurance is likely to work. The most systems of insurance work on the idea that you spread out the risk around a broad amount of possible people, so that when the really terrible misfortune happens to one or two individual people, a terrible car accident, or God forbid your house burns down or something like that, then everybody else kicking in, bit by bit and never taking anything out is how they cover the cost for the people who need their lives put back together. In health insurance, it works a little bit tougher because everybody needs the doctor eventually. Everybody, even if you're in terrific shape, take good care of yourself, there's always a possibility you get hit by a bus, even if you never have that happen to you. Cancer diagnoses, you never know when you're going to diagnose with some disease that causes you to have massive medical bills. So this is the problem facing health insurance companies. And the way that they got through it in the past was, well, we'll just have lots of people buy our product and then not get much out of it because they don't really need to go to the doctor that often. And that works up until the premiums become so high that people are like, you know what, I don't want to buy this. This isn't worthwhile. This is the Obama approach to this, which, by the way, he mocked when he was a candidate back in 2008, was to say, okay, well, we're just going to make people buy health insurance. That way there are enough young, healthy people paying into the system and getting not nearly as much back in return. And that's how you keep the system solvent. Now, Republicans didn't agree with that. They didn't believe there's a constitutional right for the government to make you buy something against your will. And here's the natural ramifications of it. Now, to the Democrats, this may be seen as something of a win. Like, okay, let's have this go through. Let's accelerate the death spiral. Let's have the entire system fall apart terribly. And then we'll have no choice but to go for Medicare for all or some other version of socialized medicine. Nonetheless, I think it's where the Democrats should be getting a good deal of the blame here, just the observation that, look, you guys built something where the only way it could work is by making young people buy something they don't want. That is a fundamentally unjust way to preserve the system, and we need a better one, preferably one that utilizes choice, preferably one that uses competition to drive down costs. That will work in the long run, not additional mandates. So we'll see. It's a good chance for the Republicans to come up and make their arguments about how health insurance can and is supposed to work again. We'll see how this happens. My sneaking suspicion is that Republicans on their way out of town don't want to argue this or anything else until just got to sit back and wait and let the House Democrats fight amongst themselves.
Jim, I'm also a little bit befuddled by the people who are thinking, oh, there's no way the Supreme Court's going to shoot this down ultimately. We got 5 on there now. Well, John Roberts is still on there. Brett Kavanaugh, I think, is a pretty careful guy, too. I don't think he's necessarily going to just implode everything. So a little bit of wishful thinking there. What do you think?
We've learned never to count your Supreme Court justices until they've hatched. I wish it was not. There are days you're not, they're going to go exactly the way you expect. You could probably make the argument that most of them worked out okay last time around. But no guarantees in life, and you should not expect things to shake out that way.
Donald Trump tweeted about the Obamacare decision. He also tweeted about a lot of other stuff this weekend, which has people from Andy McCarthy to Ben Shapiro saying, you really should stop tweeting about this stuff. It's really not helpful to you when you're in the midst of this massive legal investigation to just constantly keep spouting out about all this stuff. So, where to start? First of all, wow, 19,000 texts between Lisa Page and her lover Peter S. of the FBI in charge of the Russia hoax were just reported as being wiped clean and gone. Such a big story that will never be covered by the fake news. Witch hunt. A real scandal, with real in all caps, is the one-sided coverage, hour by hour, of networks like NBC and Democrats' spin machines like Saturday Night Live. It's all nothing less than unfair news coverage and Dem commercials. Should be tested in courts. Can't be legal? Only defame and belittle. Collusion? And then he went on to say it looks here as though General Flynn's defenses are incidental to something larger, which is for the prosecution to figure out if it can find a path to Donald Trump without quite knowing what that crime might be. It stops looking like prosecution and more looking like a persecution of the president. He's quoting Daniel Henninger of the Wall Street Journal. Then he goes on to talk about how the Russian witch hunt hoax is the insurance policy that was in place before he even got elected. And then he went to talking about Michael Cohen became a rat after the FBI did something which was absolutely unthinkable and unheard of until the witch hunt was illegally started. They broke into an attorney's office. Why didn't they break into the DNC or get to the server or Crooked's office? So that's enough of the tweets. But what do you make of him just not having much of a filter and not having much restraint here, which, of course, is not surprising at all?
Yeah, I mean, like, on the one hand, this is the guy everybody knew they were going to elect in 2016, but I believe we're in here at the end of 2018, heading into 2019, we're starting to see the real consequences of this. We've seen several members of Trump's legal team depart on less than amiable terms, in part because they would tell him things like, it is in your best legal interest that you stop tweeting about this, that you stop making public comments. Let's fight this in the courtroom. And Trump refuses to do that. And I think what's even worse is that Trump will agree with, tell them to their face, yes, I agree with you. I will not do that. And then on the way home, apparently they see his tweets about this. No one's begrudging Trump his own frustration or anger about the whole thing, but venting like this, you only make your lawyer's job harder. And I guess there's a question of, what do you prioritize? Venting your spleen or winning the case? This is not an unusual circumstance for anyone who's been in a hard-fought legal case or facing criminal charges. In some cases, you can succeed by attacking the prosecutor, but generally you succeed by doing so in the courtroom. Venting your spleen, making very obvious mistakes. Like, of course they had a warrant when they went after Michael Cohen's offices. This is, if that's illegal, then every search and everything done by every law enforcement agency in the entire country is illegal. Trump doesn't know about this terminology, or he doesn't care about this terminology. He just feels this sense of victimization, and he wants to share it with the world and vent it and all that kind of stuff. Look, there's a time to listen to the professionals, and Trump refuses to do that. He is unlikely to change anytime. I don't think anytime soon or anytime ever. And so this is where we're going to be. And to the extent he's convinced he's helping himself. And there's apparently no one on earth who can tell him this is not helping your case. This is not helping your argument. You're getting stuff wrong. I did write in today's Jolt something kind of interesting, that Robert Mueller's numbers are not terrific. Generally 43% approval, 40% disapproval. So you could make an argument that Trump's attacks on Mueller are having an effect. But I would also point out that this is with Mueller saying nothing. Presumably, if and when Mueller makes his report, Mueller will be free to defend his reputation and to make counter-arguments against Trump and things like that. So basically, with a completely non-responsive target, Trump is not winning this fight. Again, I don't think you can change Trump's personality. I'm sure everybody and their brother has told him, you got to stop tweeting about this. Not every thought you have about this needs to be instantly transmitted to the entire public. And but he doesn't. He just seems to get a little happy reaction. My guess is that he writes out "no collusion" or "witch hunt," and he reads all the tweets of saying, "Yeah, you tell him, Mr. President," and it makes him feel better. That's great, but doesn't help you in the legal fight. And I don't think it's necessarily helping him in the political fight either.
Okay, let's move on to our crazy martini now, and this is courtesy of the Free Beacon and the Washington Post. First, the Free Beacon. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat, Massachusetts, lamented the racism of her fellow white Americans Friday in a commencement speech at Morgan State University, a historically black college, admitting she is, quote, not a person of color after years of identifying as a Cherokee. Warren focused on her economic message and how it ought to help disadvantaged minorities, the Washington Post reports. At the Baltimore College, she blamed America for failing to open doors for everyone and even overtly harming black people. Quote, as a country, we need to stop pretending that the same doors open for everyone because they don't. I'm not a person of color, and I haven't lived your life or experienced anything like the subtle prejudice or more overt harm that you may have experienced just because of the color of your skin, Jim. So obviously, it can be a larger discussion and a deeper discussion about opportunities for people of different races and coming from different ethnic and economic backgrounds and so forth. But this is perhaps the coda to one of the biggest self-blunders in recent American politics, where Elizabeth Warren thought she had won this debate and scored major points against President Trump because of that DNA test that showed her 0.9 or something % Indian. And now she knows it's blown up in her face, and now she's finally admitting she's white, which everyone knew the whole time.
That's great she's saying this now. That's not what Harvard was saying way back when.
Right.
Quite literally, explicitly calling her a person of color. And, look, I'm sure some people are going to say, Jim, you'll never be satisfied with whatever Elizabeth Warren says. And maybe that's possibly true. But, when she says, I am not a person of color, implicit in that is, and I should not have been described as one by Harvard. She's never been quite clear on how Harvard would get that mistaken impression that, I just happen to have some interest in my heritage that is, one 1,024th to perhaps one, was it 512th or something like that? An exceptionally small, percentage of her heritage. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with having that pride in the heritage, but the sneaking suspicion is that this was not a terribly diverse faculty there over at Harvard. And one of the ways they managed to, just dodge some of the criticism of that is to say, well, look, we've got diversity. Look at these folks who really weren't as diverse as the university wanted to pretend. And, it would help if we had more honesty about these sorts of conversations. And, we've discussed in earlier weeks how this is likely to not help her amongst minority groups in the past. It's good to see. We saw that story in the Boston Globe suggesting that, maybe she realizes now she really botched this. I think, fairly or not, affirmative action is perceived by a chunk of the American public as not necessarily always helping, minorities who actually, need that leg up and who will go on to achieve great things if they get that little bit of extra help at some stage earlier in their careers. But it's seen as a system of cheating. It's seen as a way for people to make really tenuous and perhaps even unsupportable ties to an oppressed minority community who they themselves are not oppressed in the slightest. And this is not a new debate. This goes back, Barack Obama said back when he was a candidate in 2000, before 2008, he didn't necessarily believe that his daughter should have an advantage over a white kid growing up poor in Appalachia. But I think Barack Obama was totally right on that. I do notice that in 8 years of his presidency, there was no sign that Barack Obama did anything to actually change the definitions of affirmative action, or really start a discussion on whether who we believe needed a little extra leg up or a little bit of help to achieve their American dream. So, to the extent we can get a more honest discussion out of this, terrific. But let's face it, for a very long time, people like Elizabeth Warren were obscuring this topic, in part by making claims that were never all that plausible. And it's rather frustrating that it took all of this. Another fair question would be, if she was not running for president, would she be making these statements, Greg?
It's a good question. Yeah, this was part of the big buildup, I think. And the question now is that she's just a regular old white person. Does that damage her presidential prospects in a party that is consumed by identity?
I was going to say, let me, step into the very unexpected role of defending Elizabeth Warren and say it probably shouldn't. I also would note, though, that it's the dishonesty. It's one of those things where I never quite liked it when Trump would call her Pocahontas, because the joke is not that Elizabeth Warren is Native American. It's the joke is to call her Pocahontas, because the joke is that she obviously isn't Native American, and how implausible her claim is. So anyway, that's where we are. Great start to the week, Greg.
Indeed. All right, Jim, good to be with you as always. He's Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and tune in again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.